To provide some context, I reside in a predominantly white suburban town in New Jersey. While my family is of Asian descent, although the town is generally fine, it's no secret that some residents hold racist views. It's one of our neighbors, whom I'll refer to as Anthony, is a retired police captain from another town and happens to be friends with our town's police chief. My mother, a first-generation immigrant, speaks English fluently but retains a noticeable Asian accent. A few years ago, my mom visited a friend on the other side of town. She parallel parked in front of her friend's house, which is situated at the bottom of a small hill. As she was leaving, a woman driving a Jeep Wrangler with her children approached from behind, but she was still a fair distance away. Sensing the opportunity, my mom pulled out of her parking spot. The road they were on was quite wide, with enough space for 5 cars side by side, and there was a stop sign about 40 feet ahead. At this point, my mom had already maneuvered her car into the middle of the road, completely out of the parking spot, and had traveled about 10 feet when the woman driving the Jeep abruptly cut in front of her, crossing a double yellow line in the process. Due to the angle at which she cut off my mom, the Jeep's rear wheel ended up tearing off my mom's front bumper. Naturally, my mom stopped immediately, and the woman, whom we'll call Karen, got out of her car after straightening it out on the road. The moment Karen stepped out of her car, she began shouting profanities at my mom. Karen demanded that my mom call the police, but my mom explained that her phone had died. Upon hearing the commotion, my mom's friend, her son, and the neighbor came out of the house to see what had happened. The neighbor, an elderly man, inquired about the situation, and Karen yelled, "Are you blind? A accident happened. Go call the police. I need to call my boyfriend." Fortunately, the son had taken a law class in college and offered to take several pictures of the accident scene, which he later sent to my mom. This becomes crucial later on. The neighbor called the police, but Karen's boyfriend arrived at the scene before the officer, whom we'll refer to as Kenny. When Kenny finally arrived, he asked my mom to explain what had occurred. However, just as my mom began recounting her side of the story, Kenny interrupted her, saying, "Wait just a minute," and walked over to speak with Karen's boyfriend. As it turned out, Karen's boyfriend, whom we'll call Sam, was a police officer in the town and was well liked by the students in the middle schools due to his occasional visit to discuss topics like DARE and other assemblies. Since Sam was off duty at the time, he was able to respond when Karen called him. The moment Kenny spotted his friend Sam, he immediately went to talk with him instead of my mom or Karen. They conversed for a while before dismissing everyone. My mom attempted to speak with Kenny before he left, but he brushed her off, stating that he had gathered the necessary information and that my mom would receive the police report in a week or 2. Upon receiving the police report, my mom discovered that it stated she had pulled out without using her blinkers and had suddenly collided with Karen's car. Additionally, Karen expected my mom's insurance to cover the damage to her rear wheel. Frustrated, my mom sought advice from our neighbor Anthony regarding the erroneous report. Anthony was livid and advised her to visit the police station and request to see the police chief. If questioned about her purpose, she should mention her intention to file an internal complaint. On that day, my mom received the photographs from the son and headed to the police station. She approached the person at the front desk and requested to see the chief. The cop informed her that she couldn't simply walk in and ask for the chief. In response, my mom asked, "All right, then where should I go to file an internal complaint?" This caught the cop's attention, and he immediately straightened up, saying, "Right here. Come with me." He led her to the back, where the deputy chief joined them and began recording the conversation. Since the chief was absent, my mom presented all the evidence to the deputy chief instead. After presenting the evidence that proved Karen had hit her instead of the other way around, my mom expressed her desire to file a corruption complaint against both Kenny and Sam. It was clear that Kenny had not properly performed his duties, as he failed to interview the actual parties involved in the accident and neglected to mention the presence of 2 passengers in Karen's car in the report. Even Karen later admitted to an investigator that Kenny never spoke to her. To add weight to her complaint, my mom even mentioned the possibility that Kenny disregarded her due to her thick Asian accent. Meanwhile, Sam had interfered with the investigation despite not being present at the scene of the accident. The deputy chief assured my mom that an internal investigation would be initiated to determine if any action needed to be taken. In the meantime, my mom filed a claim with her insurance company and presented them with the evidence as well. Recognizing that the accident was clearly not her fault, the insurance company decided not to compensate Karen and instead contacted Karen's insurance to cover the damages to my mom's car. A lengthy process of internal bureaucratic investigation ensued, including interviews with Karen, my mom's friend, and the friend's neighbor. After about a month, an officer visited our house to inform my mom that Kenny had been disciplined, although there was insufficient evidence to punish Sam, and to inquire if there were any other concerns. Since Karen had not taken any further action and the car damage had been paid for, my mom stated that there were no additional concerns. Now comes the interesting part. 3 days after the officer's visit, we received a court hearing notice in the mail. It turned out that Karen had decided to file 3 tickets against my mom just 1 day before the statute of limitations expired. Surprisingly, in New Jersey, citizens are allowed to file complaints against other citizens for breaking the law, something our family had never heard of before this incident. Due to the late filing of these complaints, we couldn't counter-complain, and our only options were to pay the fine or go to court. We suspected that Karen learned about this complaint filing option from Sam, and she likely assumed that my mom, with her thick Asian accent, wouldn't know how to handle the tickets and would simply pay up. However, Karen underestimated my mom, who is actually quite assertive and has an extensive network of contacts. Within a day, my mom hired a lawyer to fight the case and requested a change of venue from our small local court to a larger court in a neighboring town. The rationale behind this decision was that fighting the case in our town would put my mom at a disadvantage, as she would essentially be going against our town's revered police force. But by moving the case to a different town, the playing field would be leveled. Additionally, while my mom worked from home in her own business, Karen had a full-time job in our town, making it inconvenient for her to attend court in a different location. The lawyer prepared a substantial amount of evidence against Karen, ensuring that she had little chance of winning the case. However, on the court date, Karen failed to appear, resulting in the case being dismissed. This victory was satisfying, but what followed was even better. Word quickly spread throughout town about Karen and Sam's deceitful actions. Soon, half the town was aware of the situation, and Karen and Sam went from being popular figures to being regarded as underhanded and unpleasant individuals. Sam was no longer invited to school assemblies, and Karen faced ostracism within the PTA of her children's school. Anthony, our neighbor, also had a private conversation with the police chief, and we discovered that although Sam wasn't officially punished, he received a severe reprimand from the chief.
Around the time I started my first full-time job and finished college, I decided to venture out into the dating world. Some of my co-workers mentioned a popular app called Tinder, so I decided to give it a try. After about a week on the app, I finally matched with a woman who we'll call Talia. Talia lived in a different city, but on the day we matched, she mentioned that she was visiting her cousin. We messaged each other through the app, and after confirming her identity through her Facebook and Instagram profiles, we exchanged phone numbers. Talia told me that she had a full-time job, her own apartment and a car, yet she was still single. We talked on the phone for about 2 weeks, always at night after my work shift, before we finally found a time to meet up when our schedules aligned. I drove my old 1996 Honda Civic to her town and spent Friday night there. Can't remember where we ate. The next morning, we had breakfast at Waffle House. Talia did have her own apartment, but it was located next door to her grandmother's place, which made for an awkward encounter the next morning. Talia revealed that her car was actually registered under her grandmother's name, and her apartment was in the name of her cousin. She even showed me family portraits with her cousin, talked about her abusive ex, and shared the embarrassing fact that her laundry room was infested with flies and roaches. That day, we officially changed our social media status to dating. It's important to note that this was my first relationship in almost 4 years, so I was quite excited. The scam on that same day. Talia informed me that she had been fired from her job about a week earlier, but was too embarrassed to tell me. I asked her how she managed to pay her bills, and she mentioned that her grandma and dad had been helping her out. Talia then asked if I could assist her in making her car payment, which was due that weekend. I declined. She then suggested that she could take out a payday loan, which is actually banned in our state, and deposit it into my checking account. I felt uneasy about this and asked if there was any other way for her to obtain the loan. Talia explained that she couldn't use her grandma or dad's accounts because they had betrayed her in the past. Although I found it strange, she started crying. Consequently, I contacted my bank where I had an account since high school graduation and opened a linked checking account. I provided Talia with the new checking account number and routing number. Talia reached out to a payday loan company in Alabama, and by Sunday morning, the funds were deposited into my linked checking account. As per our agreement, I gave her the money. Talia promised to repay the loan within 2 weeks. I had my doubts, but I returned home and went back to work on Monday. On Wednesday, Talia called me to inform me that she had found a new job. I asked if she had taken care of the payday loan with her first paycheck. She claimed that she had, but 2 weeks later, I was charged $47. I immediately contacted my bank, called Talia to confirm that the loan was in her name, and disputed the charge from the payday loan company since I was not the authorized person. Talia and I agreed to meet 2 weeks later over Memorial Day weekend. She informed me that her dad had given her a check for the full loan amount of $1,800, which she would deposit into my bank near her. Unfortunately, I allowed her to deposit the check right before the holiday weekend, unaware of what was to come. 2 weeks later, the payday loan company charged an additional $47, along with penalty fees and another $47. To my dismay, the $1,800 check bounced. Talia stopped responding to my calls and blocked me on all platforms. Realizing I had fallen victim to fraud, I immediately contacted my bank and reported the incident. Within hours, my main checking account, savings account containing $800 saved for a new car, and the new checking account were closed. My college best friend, whom we'll call Clark, discovered that Talia had 2 separate social media accounts. One she shared with me and another where she had a boyfriend. It turned out that her cousin from the family photos was actually her high school boyfriend, Jason. Despite Jason being in prison, Talia frequently visited him, as evident from their social media posts. They even had plans to get married. I spent days trying to recover my accounts and money. A representative from my bank, along with Clark and my mom, advised me to press charges for fraud. The bank sent me a copy of the bounced check, which revealed that Jason's name, not Talia's father's, was on the check. That's when I decided to seek revenge. As I pursued legal action against Talia for forgery and fraud, I discovered the name and phone number of Talia's apartment complex. I left a message for the management informing them about the unsanitary conditions in Talia and her grandmother's apartments. Within a week, Clark showed me that Talia had posted a request for temporary housing for herself and her grandmother, as her parents refused to let them move in. Meanwhile, Talia's payday loan company began calling me, as she had provided them with my phone number instead of hers. At that time, I was still considering my legal options. One day, I answered their call and explained that Talia had fraudulently used my checking account. The representative transferred me to their legal department, who expressed great interest. It turned out that Talia's grandmother and father also owed money to the payday loan company. Although the amounts were not significant individually, the company had enough evidence, including my claim, to implicate Talia as the mastermind behind the fraudulent use of her family's accounts. I provided the evidence I'd gathered, including Talia's text messages promising repayment, the copy of the bounced check and my bank statements. By the end of the year, Talia was arrested on multiple charges. Her grandmother and father were also arrested but accepted plea deals for lesser charges in exchange for providing evidence against her. I did not have to testify at the trial, but I kept myself informed. During the trial, Talia's grandmother suffered a minor heart attack, and it is uncertain whether she survived or not. Despite the unfortunate circumstances, Talia was sentenced to prison for multiple counts and will serve over a decade behind bars.